You are listening to Smart Women's Dating Podcast, episode number 25. Welcome to Smart Women's Dating Podcast. I am your host, certified life coach Lærke Nielsen, and I help smart, independent women attract the love they deeply desire without having to chase or settle. This podcast will give you the mindset tools and insights you need to finally crack the code to your love life. Are you ready? Then let's go! Emotional intimacy and long-term commitment. This is what we as women want, right? It's what we're dreaming of and looking for. The problem is that men are not always that eager to commit. They are not always emotionally available. It's always men who avoid emotional intimacy. Or is it? This week I'm going to talk about what it looks like when you as a strong independent woman carry this invisible or pretty well disguised fear of intimacy. How it can present itself in different ways, such as fear of losing your freedom, fear of feeling trapped, fear of settling, or fear of committing to someone who wants to get really close to you and take up time and space and become an important part of your life, and also make you vulnerable for heartbreak. I'm going to share some reasons why some of us have this fear and how it shows up, because it can be difficult to recognize, and you will want to recognize it because it can sabotage your love life. And I'll also give you some tips on how you can overcome that fear. But first of all, I want to announce this month's winner of a free coaching session with me. ST from London. She says, I love these podcasts by Lærke. They seem so relevant and are delivered in a kind and delicate way, which is important if feeling a bit low. Looking forward to hearing more of them, and of course, you can revisit old episodes too. So helpful. Thank you. Thank you so much, ST from London. I love this review, and I really appreciate your kind words. So thank you for taking the time to write this. And you have won a free power coaching session, and all you have to do is connect with me either on Instagram, where you can find me at Lærke the Love Coach, Laerke, or you can write me an email, and you can find the email address in the show notes. So send me a screenshot of your review and we will set up a time for you to get your session. I can't wait to meet you. If you want to win a free session with me, you can do this too. Go to Apple Podcast and write a review if you think this podcast is helpful and you want to recommend it to other women. So back to the topic of today. Do you recognize yourself in this? You love your freedom. The life that you've built is actually quite amazing. You have an exciting career and a fun and interesting social life. You enjoy being in control of things and having the freedom to choose when and where, and you don't want anyone else to mess it up. Especially not if you risk feeling trapped or getting bored, ending up in a daily routine that just repeats itself. Except you do want someone in your life. You have a deep longing in your heart for connection and emotional intimacy. That one special person who gets you and sees you and gives you a hug when you had a rough day even before you told him. Someone to go on vacation with or just weekend trips, to enjoy the best of life with. But it's just not happening. You keep attracting men that are not ready or available for a commitment, and those who are seem boring to you. Or you go along and agree to start a relationship, but then you practically always know from the beginning that it's not going to work long term because he isn't your level intellectually, and you don't think you have a lot to talk about. Or there's an age gap between you, or there's something about him that's a no-go for long term with you. So although he seems to be crazy about you, you never really feel that this is right for you. And if you meet someone who could be a potential partner and is actually at your level and you start dating, then when it gets more serious, you start to sense that something is off, there's something wrong, although you struggle to say exactly what it is because he actually seems to tick all the boxes. And maybe it's just that you don't have this satisfaction of overcoming a challenge because he isn't a challenge, he's almost too easy, and that in itself feels triggering. It's like a sign that there's something wrong with him. He wants too much of your time, and you think it's really strange because you're not used to someone being this overly available and wanting to spend so much time with you. So you tell yourself he's needy and you feel that you have to pull away. Or maybe you go on a lot of first dates only and you go on and off the dating apps and don't really make it a commitment to take your love life seriously. On the surface, you do want a relationship and you do feel ready. But if this is something that keeps showing up in your life over a longer time, not just with one or two guys, but you keep attracting men that are unavailable and reject those that are and enter into relationships with men that are clearly not a long term fit for you, it could be because you are not available yourself. You are, of course, on the surface, and you do acknowledge that you have emotional needs, but when it comes to it, in real life, when someone really wants you, you are not ready to let them all the way in. And that's why you stay on the safe side of it all. It's safe to focus on a man that you know you most likely can't have. It's safe to be in a relationship or a situationship with a man who is so off your criteria that you know you will never want a long term relationship with him, and you might not even feel that it's possible to fall in love with him. And it feels safe to end a relationship that could have all the right ingredients when it starts to become more serious. And the problem with fear of intimacy is exactly that last scenario, where it can make you end a relationship with a man that could be a perfectly good match for you. So, just to clarify, having fear of intimacy and fear of commitment isn't 100% the same. But if you have fear of intimacy, it can look like fear of commitment from the outside because you avoid committing. But you can have commitment fear without intimacy fear. And commitment fear also shows up in other areas of life whenever we are making a big decision that isn't that easy to undo, where you commit yourself to something like signing a job contract or buying a house. The fear of being trapped with the wrong decision doesn't necessarily relate to intimacy fear. It can come from a lack of self-trust. It can also come from not knowing yourself well enough to actually know what you want, and therefore be confused and not ready to commit. And you can also avoid commitment on purpose without having any intimacy fear. You might not desire a deep emotional connection, but be more interested in something casual if you just got out of a long term relationship or marriage, for instance. But it doesn't mean that you necessarily have a fear of intimacy. When you have fear of intimacy, on the other hand, you really do desire emotional intimacy. You long for it. But somewhere deep in your unconscious mind, there's a story that having someone get really close to you is not safe. There is a risk that they can leave you or that you will lose yourself in it. And this is blocking you, this is preventing you from fully opening up. It's basically a self-protective mechanism. It's like if your nervous system has decided that you need an emotional bodyguard to protect your heart. The only problem is that you don't really know what's going on. Your intimacy fear is often hidden to yourself. You just notice that your love life isn't working out, and you might tell yourself it's because there are no good men out there, and you should lower your standards. And none of that is true. So why do we have fear of intimacy? You want to take a look at your past and see what happened, even if it's a long time ago. You could have experienced a breach in trust with someone you were supposed to be able to trust, and this leads you to develop a high level of independence and live by the principle of only trusting yourself and never letting anyone get really close to you. But because it's such a long time ago and it feels like it's just part of who you are, you don't see it yourself. It's also very likely that you've experienced heartbreak, maybe several times, or that you experienced losing someone close to you, or all of it. And maybe you felt that there wasn't a support network around you. You felt very alone with the pain. You had to deal with everything on your own, pull yourself up and pick up the pieces, and try to move forward while healing your heart the best that you could. And this has led you to make the decision never ever again. So you built a wall around your heart to protect yourself. And as time goes by and the pain diminishes and your focus shifts to other areas of your life and you move on with things, it feels like you're back to normal again. Except the wall is still there. So I'm going to share what happened in my life that led me to have intimacy fear. When I was 29, I lost my dad after almost 3 years of illness, and he was only 55 when he died, so you can see it was way too early. I loved him so much, so it was a difficult time for me when he was ill, and in particular, of course, when he died. And at this time, I was in a relationship with a guy that I also lived with, and we had been together for 2 years. I was getting support from a therapist to help me cope with the situation, and when my dad passed away, I remember the therapist said, "Well, now it can't get any worse. Now you're at the bottom," sort of as an attempt to comfort me. But then I came back a few weeks later and told him, "You know what? It actually just got a bit worse now because my boyfriend just left me. He broke up and moved out of the apartment last weekend." And then the therapist said, "Well, now it can't get any worse." But then a few weeks later, I came back into the therapist's office and said, "You know what? It just got a bit worse again because someone told me about how my ex had been cheating on me for months, and I was so angry with him." Now, as I mentioned, this whole scenario happened when I was 29, and I spent a long time grieving the loss of both my dad and my boyfriend. Even if he betrayed me, it was a difficult breakup, and it was a difficult time for me to have someone leave me. So that was the perfect mix of grief, heartbreak, and betrayal of trust. And for years after that, I had difficulties opening up to really believing in love again and trusting that it was safe to let someone in on a deep emotional level. I see that now, but I didn't when I was in it. I more experienced it like there wasn't really anyone interesting. I didn't meet someone I wanted a long-term commitment with. And if I had a longer relationship, it was typically something that felt more like a friendship than actual romantic love. I avoided getting too deeply involved. And as I didn't identify the intimacy fear at the time, I also didn't work intentionally on overcoming it. But I did manage to move on and open up years later when I felt more reassured in myself and more resilient emotionally. So, I want to share with you here how you can work on intentionally releasing the fear of intimacy if you notice this in yourself. You want to first of all acknowledge that there are no guarantees in love. It always comes with a risk of heartbreak. So don't try to ignore that. Instead, get really honest with yourself and ask yourself, do you think it might be worth the risk? What if it all works out so much better than you can imagine? What is the risk of not opening up to love? And is that the life you want? And then the question that you can use for many different situations in life: what would you regret if you look back on your life at age 95? You want to have compassion for yourself. Your fear is there to protect you, but the fear is created from experiences in your past and is no longer relevant. It is misguided and it keeps you from experiencing true love. And then you also want to decide to have your own back. Build your self-trust. Make a conscious choice to move forward into something that will always be unknown. And make a commitment to yourself first of all, that you will be there for you. You will honor your boundaries and stay connected to the rest of your life, because this will also make you more resilient emotionally. Recognizing fear of intimacy can be challenging because, as I mentioned, it's often hidden to ourselves. And sometimes what shows up as being a bit off in a connection with a man, it is indeed off. It's not a question of fear of intimacy. So it's important to be able to see the difference. This is some of the things I help my clients with. Recognizing when they have fear of intimacy, understanding why they have it, and finding strategies to release that fear so they can go to the other side where all the amazing love and connection is waiting for them. So if you now feel you might have some degree of intimacy fear and you want support on overcoming that, or if what you hear on this podcast is resonating with you and you're curious to hear more about how I can support you in attracting love, then I will invite you to book a free 45 minutes call with me to get more clarity and find out if this is something for you. I would love to talk to you. So go to the link in the show notes or on my website, Lærke the Love Coach, and you can also find me on Instagram, Lærke the Love Coach, Laerke. Thank you so much for listening and have a beautiful week. If you like what you're hearing on this podcast and you want to get support from a coach on your love journey, I invite you to book a free consult call with me. You will find the link in the show notes. And also, don't forget to subscribe, and I would love it if you would rate and review this podcast, and then you'll also help other women find it.